Good evening, everybody. Hello and welcome to HUD-TV. I'm Dakota Antelman, and this is the 5th episode of our new news magazine show, the Hudson Spotlight. On today's broadcast, we're bringing you 3 different stories, all focusing on different corners of this community. That means we have a lot to get to, so let's get started. We go now to our lead story. Earlier this fall, Hudson residents received the startling news that mosquitoes throughout the town had tested positive for the West Nile virus, which can be highly dangerous to humans if contracted. We talked to our friend Kelly Callow at the Hudson Health Department about what that meant and how residents could stay safe. The Hudson Health Department announced earlier this month that several mosquitoes in the town's western portion had tested positive for the West Nile virus. With those infected suffering everything from no symptoms to lethal ones, the virus is a serious, albeit common problem for health officials like Kelly Callow.
It's not necessarily very rare. Northborough, I believe, already this year has already gotten 6 positive. It's not rare, but the weather that we've had this year, with the amount of rain that we've had and the amount of heat that we've had, it's been a nice environment for mosquitoes to breed in. And I think that's the reason why we're finding more mosquitoes with West Nile virus.
In each case where a mosquito tested positive for West Nile, the town worked with the Central Massachusetts Mosquito Control Project to spray high-risk areas with a special chemical designed to kill mosquitoes. In addition to spraying in large areas, several residents across town have utilized a free service to have their personal property sprayed.
Yeah, of course. So mosquitoes are the number one transmitter of the disease. So you will get West Nile virus mainly from mosquito bites. And so it's important for us as a health department to do spraying in the areas that the West Nile virus was found. And for individuals and residents within Hudson to take precautions using bug spray with DEET, wearing long clothing when out, trying not to be out between dusk and dawn when mosquitoes are most prevalent, just to take precautions and prevent mosquito bites, because we really don't want there to be a human case.
Beyond spraying, the town and the Mosquito Control Project have taken measures including removing discarded tires from properties and treating standing bodies of water, such as abandoned swimming pools, with chemicals to disrupt the environments where mosquitoes like to lay their eggs. Necessary to prevent West Nile from infecting residents, Callow says these measures bear no side effects for humans.
No, they do it after dusk, so when it's late around 11 p.m., so many people are not outside, and it's just going to affect the mosquitoes.
As much help as spraying can provide, though, Callow notes that it does not solve the mosquito problem, putting some burden on residents to protect themselves. So far, they've been doing so well, as 2018 has seen no confirmed human cases of the virus anywhere in Massachusetts. The health department wants to keep that number unchanged and, as a result, now sees itself in a position of educator.
When we got the notification that there was West Nile virus within Hudson, we immediately notified the public via Facebook pages, via town email, via the town website, and our health department website. So just educating people to take their own personal precautions against mosquito bites is our main goal.
Worth noting, since we recorded that package and published it on our YouTube page, 38 residents across Massachusetts have tested positive for the virus according to state data. At the time that we published that, no residents had tested positive. Additionally, even as the weather changes as we enter the later fall, the state is urging residents to remain vigilant, as it still lists Hudson as the site of moderate risk for West Nile infection. Of course, we thank Kelly Callow from the Health Department for helping us with that story then and continuing to help us with it now. Moving on, though, we're actually staying in town halls. We head across to the town clerk's office for a special interview with a woman town executive assistant Tom Moses has called Hudson's election savant. Her name is Joan Wardell. And with this year's midterm elections rapidly approaching, we talked to her and Moses about a series of changes to voting procedures in recent years and the effect that they've had on the process here in Hudson. Let's take a look. The upcoming 2018 midterm elections may be the last major ones to take place in Massachusetts before a monumental automatic voter registration program takes effect in 2020. Marking just the latest in a decade of similarly tectonic changes to the local voting process in particular, local officials like Hudson Executive Assistant Tom Moses and Town Clerk Joan Wardell are reflecting on their histories and celebrating recent advancements such as automatic registration.
Anything they can do to register more voters, I think is fantastic. The goal should be 100% of eligible voters.
As is true with much of the country, Hudson has historically struggled to get residents to the polls on Election Day. In 2016, however, that was not the case, as voters gathered in droves for that year's presidential election.
As national politics has become more polarized, I think, at least in this last election, we've seen the numbers go up. They were huge. I don't know what the town clerk has, but I think the turnout was something like 80% of the registered voters.
2016's was a presidential election of historic proportions for many reasons. One such reason, however, which gets little press, was the introduction of online voter registration. A precursor to the automatic registration now in process, the online process streamlined the path for Massachusetts voters to register. Reflecting on the unusually high turnout in that election, Wardell in part credits online registration.
They think the online voter registration encourages people from their desks to register to vote, to know where they vote, make sure everything's correct. Sometimes people, when they write their name or sign their name, it's not really clear. So now with the computer, it comes over a lot clearer.
Agreeing it influenced the election's turnout, Moses, however, cautioned against crediting too much of the spike to online registration.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. It probably was a factor, but it gets absorbed by the bigger factors of who's in the race and what type of election it is. So it's hard to see the effect.
Regardless, Moses, Wardell, and many others across the state are excited for automatic registration to take effect, as they hope it will alleviate some existing problems that still prevent some voters from casting ballots, even with advancements such as online registration.
People are mobile. People don't understand that if they move, they have to move the registration. With automatic registration, when they change their driver's license, hopefully that will curb that issue.
Ultimately, they add, even as the state works to build up their automatic registration policy and program from the ground up, they see very few downsides to it.
Not that I can see at the moment. I mean, if the opportunity is to register every person that is eligible, then that will be good. But sometimes people get nervous when they're at the RMV and may get registered incorrectly when they're not eligible. So that's something the state has to look at.
Big thanks to Tom Moses and Joan Wardell for help with that package. The midterm general elections we were talking about throughout that package will take place on November 6th of this year. Key races on this year's ballot include the fight to replace retiring U.S. Representative Nikki Tsongas. Republican Rick Green will face Democrat Lori Trahan, the winner of a jam-packed primary race back in September for that election. In the race for Senate, the GOP's Geoff Diehl is challenging Democratic incumbent Elizabeth Warren in her first re-election bid. At the State House, Jay Gonzalez and Quentin Palfrey are running as Democrats for the governor and lieutenant governor's offices, currently occupied by Republicans Charlie Baker and Karen Polito, respectively. Other contested races include that for Hudson's State Senate Representative, State Auditor, Treasurer, Attorney General, and Secretary of State. Finally, the ballot will also include a series of hotly contested referendum questions. The first will decide whether or not to establish limits on how many patients individual nurses can treat during the same shift. A yes vote on the second question would establish a committee to advocate a constitutional amendment to better regulate campaign finance and corporate personhood. Finally, question 3 will decide whether to approve a transgender anti-discrimination bill already passed by the state Senate. Those interested in voting in that election must register by October 17th, so that date is rapidly approaching. Additionally, those interested in learning more about these issues and key races can visit the nonpartisan educational site Ballotpedia, among other resources. Moving on now to our final story of this episode, though, we leave town hall and politics in general and head further downtown to visit Tim Johnson and the pop-up art show he recently held here. Tim Johnson is not your typical artist. He lists the Beastie Boys as one of his major influences and has depicted everything from 90s rappers to comic book characters in his art. This month, Johnson brought that particular brand of art to a town that has recently embraced creators who pushed the boundaries of food, drink, fashion, and much more in recent years. That town is Hudson.
I think I kind of try to call it street art for the home, because I tried a lot of it's graffiti inspired, but not not very wild things. I mean, I guess some of it's a little out there, but I try to do stuff that you could kind of hang almost anywhere in your house as long as you're a little bit funky. You know, I do a lot of different colors, so almost any of this would blend anywhere. But a lot of it is with an eye towards interior design, yet still, pop art and graffiti sensibilities to tie it all together. So
Johnson is no townie. Rather, he moved to Hudson just this year, seeking to find a home after a breakup. It was, in fact, from that headspace that he committed to selling more of his art than ever before.
A lot of this art was made over the course of the past 10 years, but I never really got out there to sell it. I've been selling word of mouth this whole time, but now I just feel like it's time to do it. And the storefront was open, it happened to be owned by a friend of mine, and it all just worked out well. And yeah.
Even as his art covered the walls around him and fetched $100 price tags, Johnson admitted his path towards such visual creativity has been a long and jagged one at best. He first put pencil to paper as a child, doodling scenes from his favorite Garfield comics. When it came time to choosing a college, however, he opted to attend Boston University and study film.
I made a couple of short films. I helped produce a movie with Adrian Grenier from, he played Vinny Chase on HBO's Entourage, so we made a movie with him that played on some short festivals, but kind of got sick of doing that. It wasn't as much fun as I wanted it to be.
From there, he turned to music, eventually settling on rap. He performed using his Smashing Pumpkins song-inspired AOL username as his pseudonym, Soma79.
4 out of 5 rappers don't know if they should snitch, if they are really rich, or what it means to be a bitch. If you don't drink beer every day before noon, then you're
I played in Boston, Middle East, Brighton Music Hall, places like that. I really enjoyed it. I get to open for people like Onyx and Warren G and Ari the Rugged Man and like Slane and the Ill Bill, and it was a great experience. But
as he had tired of film, however, Johnson also grew disenchanted with rap, saying the lack of legitimate rap fans in the Boston scene frustrated him. Seeking an outlet, he finally returned to drawing and other forms of visual art.
My friends used to come to our hip-hop shows. They were always drawing with paint markers, so I just bought some and I just started. And the first piece I did was just the drawing of the Punisher from Marvel Comics, and came out good. So I did an Aquaman one, a Daredevil one, and then I just started expanding more and more. And it started by copying other people's artwork, but then now I really can draw almost anything.
By then running with art, he began creating at a near fever pace in 2015 as a challenge to himself after struggling to accurately paint a portrait of action star Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
I put it down, and that was right around New Year's, and I made a resolution that I'd draw a portrait every day for a year. So I drew 365 portraits in 2015, and it got me, that's what I needed to do to get better. Like, that was a huge step forward for me. And once I did that, I realized that it was almost a compulsion for me, and I've been working on art almost every day since.
Johnson's pop-up show, advertised under his Soma79 name, generated buzz long before he opened his doors, and drew customers off the Hudson streets throughout the Columbus Day weekend. Now that pop-up show is behind him, though, Johnson is excited to continue growing his art career here by selling to neighbors and hosting further events in the future, in a town that he says has already embraced his style of creativity.
So I just want to be somebody that people in town can come to with any ideas they have. I mean, I hope you think that if you saw this stuff that I could do pretty much any, if you have an idea, I might not be able to replicate the Sistine Chapel ceiling, but I can pretty much do probably anything you want to do. And I think that was sort of part of the message I wanted to make, is that no matter what your tastes are, no matter what your price range is, I can probably do something for you. So, I have prints, paintings, anything. It's like, I'll be working on this stuff whether anybody buys it or not. So, but my apartment's getting pretty cramped, so,
Big thanks to Tim Johnson for allowing us such access to his art show. Stay tuned in the future for more on his story, as HUD-TV hopes to soon create a documentary on his roller coaster art career. For now, though, that wraps up this episode of Hudson Spotlight. For HUD-TV, I've been Dakota Antelman. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.